In the third part of our series on standards and regulation in Europe, we will look at the development of European norms based on standardization requests from the European Commission. It may be surprising to know that European standards are voluntary. The European Parliament sets regulation, including essential requirements, that become the legal requirements that products must comply with. The three European standards organisations produce standards that, if followed, will ensure that you meet the regulation. So this is how standards and regulations are linked together. The European Commission requests them through standardisation requests. Every year, the Commission produces a list of areas where standards are needed. This is called the Annual Union Work Programme for European Standardisation and is available on the internet. These harmonised standards are called Harmonised European Norms, or HENS, and once approved they are listed in the official journal of the European Union. It's important to note that harmonised European norms follow the same numbering scheme as European norms, which means that the number will not give away if the standard is harmonised or not, but the title will indicate clearly if the standard was delivered under a standardisation request and followed the SR-DAP process, or if it was produced following the ENAP process. The Radio Equipment Directive, known as RED, is a good example of how a single standardisation request has resulted in many ENs developed by ETSI. The directive is applicable to all radio equipment and ensures that the spectrum is used efficiently, along with other requirements. Radios cover a vast range of devices, from VHF used in maritime to 5G mobile phones. ETSI creates separate ENs for different frequency bands or technologies. For example, EN 300-328 is used for the 2.4 GHz ISM band, which in turn is used for Wi-Fi and Bluetooth devices. Finding these standards on the ETSI website is easy. Just click on the Standards tab and then select one of the HSs cited in the OJ buttons. All of the related ENs appear and can be downloaded for free by anybody. The European Commission requests the standards through a standardisation request. The ETSI process is called Standardisation Requests Deliverables Approval Process, or SR-DAP for short. Creating this type of standard is quite similar to the ENAP process, which we covered in part 2. The first difference is that the standardisation request has to be accepted by the national standards bodies. Once this has been approved, the work item is created in the technical group and this is adopted by the NSBs. The standard is then written using the same methods as any of the other standards written within ETSI. At the end of the process, the EN is approved by the NSBs. The NLF is the framework around which legislation and standards are brought together by the European Commission. It's not that new. It was adopted back in 2008. For consumers, the CE mark is seen on many products that we buy. This means that the manufacturer is declaring that the product meets all relevant EU legislation. The UK has a similar scheme called the CA mark. The standards help ensure that testable criteria are available so that either the manufacturer or a test house, the ones approved by the European Commission are called notified bodies, can show compliance with the regulation. As new areas are identified for legislation and standards, the European Commission produce a list in their Annual Union Work Programme. If we take a look at the 2025 examples, we can see technologies such as cybersecurity, artificial intelligence and trusted data where legislation is being drafted, which will require standardization requests, which in turn will lead to new European norms created by ETSI. That can then become a harmonised European norm if referenced in the EU OJ by the European Commission. This early identification helps ETSI prepare for the upcoming work. As we saw earlier, standardisation requests are the method that the European Commission uses to initiate standards creation within the ESOs. These are publicly available on the Commission's website, and it's highly recommended that you go and read some of them. They clearly describe the policy objectives and public interests, identify all of the standards needed, and express the content requirements as well as setting deadlines. A pre-consultation process is used to ensure that the request is feasible before the Commission agrees an implementing decision. The national standard bodies are simply a subset of the national standards organisations for the member states within the European Union. This is the main reason for the difference in the approval process we saw earlier. Since standardisation requests from the European Commission are linked to the member states, it is only those national standards bodies that are part of the approval process. You will remember that I said that there were 29 NSBs of the 30 EU EEA countries. That's because Liechtenstein is currently not partaking in the process. Work always starts with a work item proposed by at least 4 supporting ETSI members in the technical committee. It contains a summary of the work to be performed and a schedule. When linked to a standardisation request after acceptance by the technical committee, they are approved by the NSBs. All of the work items are published on the ETSI portal and can be publicly viewed. At this stage, it is very important to ensure that there is no overlap between the standard being developed in the NSBs and those being developed within ETSI. This process is called standstill, and the NSBs check the work items against the ongoing work in their committees, and if there is any overlap, the NSBs put it on hold. This ensures that countries don't have contradictory standards, and most importantly, it focuses the effort at European level, bringing all the experts together. Just as we saw in Part 2 with ENAP, the standards are written by the experts in the technical committees. Contributions are made from the individual ETSI members creating the standard using a consensus-based process. Again, voting is possible, but very rarely used. Depending on the conditions set in the standardisation request, a system to check the European norms that were created under SRDAP before referencing them in the EU OJ can be triggered. As the standard process proceeds, experts check the content to ensure the standards are compliant with the legislation. It's called the HAS assessment process for the harmonised standards, and the experts are called HAS consultants. Once the EN is mature, they perform a rigorous assessment and provide a report back to the ETSI Technical Committee. Changes can then be made before moving on to the national voting stage. The final important step in the process is citation in the official journal of the European Union. As you can see, these are signed by the President of the Commission. There are situations where a standard may not be available, or a manufacturer may not know how to apply an existing standard. In such cases, they might seek assistance from a third party to ensure their product complies with regulations or to confirm compliance independently. Here, notified bodies are used. They have technical expertise and a deep understanding of the regulations with Europe. They can test products, issue certificates, and all the approved test houses are listed on the European Commission website. I hope you now have a good understanding of the process. So a quick recap. ETSI develops European norms to support the European Commission standardization requests that have become harmonised European norms once referenced by the EU in the OJ. Technical experts draft these specifications in a fully transparent process. ETSI work closely with the NSBs to gain inclusiveness. The European Commission have a strong process to take legislation into standardization requests. Finally, the ETSI standards are used to support notified bodies and market surveillance authorities. Thank you.